my whole point is we don't need to do the rundown. We just are focusing on the 3 fights of the week because it just seems that was my point. I didn't mean to throw you off, but that's.
Like I said, they're short. There's not much this.
But you got 3. You picked 3. There's 3 fights you're picking, right? What's
three fights we got this week actually.
What's the first one?
We spoke earlier today, but I decided after we spoke, the Rocky Fielding versus Brandon Vera fight is interesting because of the whole card. That's because Callum Smith is on that card, and there's a big showdown potential for those 2 right there. And of course, the Timothy Bradley, Jesse Vargas, and Diego Magdaleno and Jose Gonzalez fight.
Okay, let me know what you think.
All right, so first we're going to break down Rocky Fielding. He's got a good strong jab. He throws a lot of volume, and he's pretty fast from middleweight. I like that. I see a lot of similarities between Rocky Fielding's style and Andy Lee's style back when Andy Lee faced Brian Vera in 2011. Rocky keeps his right hand up and it's cocked. It's ready to go all the time, just like Andy Lee used to do. And when he does let it go, Rocky's, he's fairly accurate with it, and that's a good thing. Being like Andy Lee at that age, that's not such a bad thing as long as, it's the version of Andy Lee that comes out on top, and it's not the version of Andy Lee that used to gas himself out, especially if it's the version of Andy Lee who beat Peter Quillen not too long ago. My cons with Rocky Fielding is he scored stoppages in over half his fights, but he hasn't faced anyone, of note. Nobody that he's defeated, with the exception of Jadron Covington, is better than anybody Brandon Vera's ever lost to. When he faced Noah Alcoba, once a pretty good fighter, Alcoba's days were way behind him. And one of the worst things that I see, again, similar like Andy Lee when Andy was younger, is that Rocky Fielding tends to throw his punches wide. Outside of his jab, everything else just comes from a mile around, even the uppercut that he gets to the body, which is one of his better punches. And when he does throw a combination, they're flurries that really they leave no damage on his opponents. They look good on the camera, but, there's nothing that, he actually does that's going to make his opponent step back. Now, Brian Vera has seen everything Rocky Fielding has to offer. If Vera's body holds up and he manages to maintain some offense, Fielding can be in for a rough night here, especially if he runs into the ring with Callum Smith, his possible next opponent. Now, Brian Vera, this is a guy here who's been in with everybody. Experience, no question. The resume, no question. And he's more than just a name on the resume. People have come to see Brian Vera as nothing more than a name because he's had a rough stretch lately. He's not the most skilled fighter by any means, but he's tough and he knows how to stay in there. That's why, people call him the upset kid. If he trains well, he's great stamina. He's very strong. He's a big middleweight. He walks around close to the cruiserweight limit when he's not in training, from what I understand. If he chooses to apply pressure, he throws a lot of guys out of the game. We've seen it against Andy Lee. We've seen it against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., Sergio Mora, Sergey Zinzurek. Vera has the ability to weather the storm and ability to make his opponents actually wear themselves out by absorbing that ability. The cons against Vera is he often relies too much on that chin in hopes that he's going to last his opponents and in hopes that his opponents do wear down. That's what cost him in that fight against James Kirkland, and that's something he did with Jadon Covington. He came into that fight thinking Covington had nothing to offer, and he got caught cold. Vera doesn't take his fight serious enough at times if he feels an opponent has nothing to offer and that's going to hurt him. So he's going to train with that mindset. He's not overly fast. He's not overly mobile. Vera's very hittable, but he's a durable opponent. My official pick on there is Rocky Fielding based on momentum, hometown advantage, and the miles on Vera. The reason why I chose this fight, Bill, because Rocky Fielding is going to answer a lot of questions here on what he's going to do next in his career. There's a book still out on him right now, but there's a lot of potential for his future.
Yeah, it's funny the way you presented this fight is similar how I was thinking. I've been ringside for several of Brian Vera's fight, including that famous upset against Andy Lee at Mohegan Sun. And the kid is so tough. But you hit it on the head. He's limited. But here's the reason why I too am going with Rocky Fielding. I would have went with Brian Vera. I really would have, because of Fielding's, his resume. I mean, he hasn't fought the level of opposition that Vera has. But in Vera's last fight against Willie Monroe, I really noticed a difference in him. He just, he was just like you said. I mean, this guy wasn't a huge skill set to begin with, but he was taking shots just a little more when he used to kind of roll his head a little bit. Now he's not rolling his head as much. He's slurring his words a little bit, and I don't know. I think you're right. I think you hit it on the head. There's just a little too much mileage on him. He's, overseas. He's fighting a young gun. He's fighting a guy that's bigger than him. I, too, am picking Rocky Fielding. So we're on the same page there. What's the next fight?
All right, next fight, of course, is going to be Timothy Bradley, and that's going to be his fight over here against Jesse Vargas.
Tough one. A lot of people are picking Vargas. What do you think? How this fight can go?
Timothy Bradley, how do you not respect the guy? He's had some great wins. He's world-class competition his whole career, no question. He's been in with the best from 140 to 147 pounds. With the exception of a few guys, he's been in with pretty much solid punches. So we know his chin is solid. The good thing about Tim is he's great at adapting to other fighter style. It's always been a bonus for him. He has a huge heart. He's going to fight anyone. Matter of fact, if we were talking about earlier today, there's a video going around where Tim Bradley actually said he'll fight Triple G at 160 pounds. He doesn't need a catch weight. That's very brave of him. Sometimes I think Tim's a little too brave for himself. He's always been, for whatever reason, Bill, as you stated, the B-side, no matter who he's fought. That dates all the way back to when he fought Junior Witter. Now, Tim always comes in top shape, but the biggest problem with him is he can't punch out of a wet paper bag. You'd never expect that looking at him. The guy's built like an Adonis. He makes up for his height and reach deficit by jabbing his way into guys, and it's always been very beneficial to him. He knows how to fight taller fighters. We've seen that in the Devin Alexander fight. Bradley has very good footwork. He moves in to get a shot off and avoid danger before his opponent has a chance to return fire. Now, the cons on Timothy Bradley, despite what I said about him moving in and out, being able to avoid punches while in danger, Tim has a bad habit of leaping in. That's where we've seen so many of those headbutts come about. And, against a bigger, taller Vargas, that could be a mistake. When he leaps in, Vargas' jab could catch him. Even a guy without power, if you get nailed coming in like that, it's going to hurt you. Tim, when he feels he's at a safe distance, he's going to carry his hands low. He carries them around in the midsection area, a lot like a few other of Vargas' past opponents did, Jose Cito Lopez, Wally Matoso, and Anton Nivikov. And you know what? Vargas was able to capitalize on all those guys because he has a very good jab. Because Tim has a lot of ring wear for everything he's accomplished, I've noticed he's slowed down a bit lately. He's also lost a bit of focus on what type of fighter he wants to be. As you and Larry were speaking about a little while ago, he's trying different things. He's tried being a banger. He's tried the trash talk. He's just trying to see what works for him. When you seen him in the Provokanov fight, we didn't know what to think. Here's Tim Bradley standing there and banging. Everybody was just in awe, not only at how much abuse that the both men were taking, just because we've never seen anything like this out of Tim Bradley. Now, Juan Manuel Marquez, he doesn't have the reflexes he used to, so he kind of makes Tim Bradley look real good in his last outing. The Marquez of 5 years ago, that would have never have happened. Against Chavez, because of Tim's excessive use of the head, see how big he swelled up. He was never that swollen in fights before the Provokanov fight. He was disfigured after that. Those catch up with you after a while. Once you start getting that scar tissue, once you start swelling up, you swell up a lot easier. Even a lot of headbutts, what people don't understand, if you get hit with a good headbutt, that's going to hurt and that can do damage. Damage to your head and brain damage, the damage that fighters suffer that, causes their neurological effects later on doesn't always have to be from a punch. The damage inside your head comes from the skull moving around and the brain moving around inside the skull and, slashing onto the side of your head, and that's what causes that concussion. And, the concussion is what leaves that long-term effects. Tim's been involved in so many of these over the years. I find it hard to believe he hasn't had more than 1 or 2 concussions. And right now, when you listen to him talk and you look at his movements, it's very, very evident. Tim is starting to show effects of it. He's not the same fighter he was just 3 years ago. Across from him, we have Jesse Vargas, who has a solid amateur background. He was a national champion in Mexico and the U.S. He has wins over 3 undefeated fighters in his last 5 bouts: Anton, Novikipov, Khabib, Oliveira, and Wally Matoso. Though his last stoppage was in 2011 over Walter Estrada, he's had wins over good vets, Reynard, Vito Gasparian, all fights he's learned from. Vargas has a solid jab. He throws in 2s and 3s. He maintains his distance, and he fights tall. Vargas is also a smart fighter. He knows he's not a power puncher, so he won't allow himself to get drawn into a brawl because that's not his strong point. He knows how to tie his opponent up and create distance. He has great foot movement. He makes his opponent seek him out, but he doesn't run. When Vargas moves and his opponent gets too close, he uses his jab to keep him off. That stops him for a minute. He lets go a combination, and then he resets himself, moves out of the way, and he makes his opponent start again. Even when an opponent is pushing the action, Vargas knows how to set the pace. He's very active with his hands, but he's not a guy who waste punches either. I like his defense. It's versatile, meaning Vargas does not rely on one method. In close, he's tight with his hands. They're held high, keeps his elbows in. From the outside, he uses the height we spoke of to his advantage. He knows how to lean back, keep his head out of range, but that's not all he relies on. He's not one of those guys that hopes his movement is going to keep him out of trouble. He never drops his hands down like we see a lot of these young guys do today. Everybody wants to fight with their hand around their waist. They want to imitate Roy Jones. If they're not doing that, they're trying to do a shoulder roll and imitate Floyd Mayweather Jr. One thing Jesse Vargas has above all of them, and this is the reason why I like him so much, he has his own identity. He's not emulating anybody inside that ring. Jesse Vargas fights like Jesse Vargas, and to this point, it scored him some quality wins. When Vargas beats a guy, he beats him bad on them cards. The closest fight was against Josecito Lopez, who at that point in time was considered a dangerous fighter. Vargas is much better now. I think that split decision against Lopez was not as close as reflected. His cons, in my opinion, as I stated, the power's not there. Sometimes he'll wait on an opponent. He is looking to figure out their pattern, and that can be a bit bad as he steps up in the level of competition. Timothy Bradley may be the highest level. Matter of fact, he's definitely the highest level of competition that Jesse Vargas has been here with so far. Officially, I'm going to pick the younger, fresher Jesse Vargas, the momentum, the less wear and tear, and in fact, he knows exactly what he's going to do, unlike Timothy Bradley, who seems to have a bit of identity crisis in that ring right now, is making the difference for me. So that's my official pick, Jesse Vargas, by decision.
Wow. I'm going against you there. I'm picking Timothy Bradley in this fight. The reason why I'm picking Timothy Bradley is I think that he's clearly one of the, just like we talked earlier, I think he's clearly one of the most underrated fighters in the sport. I don't get why people don't like him. I'm not suggesting you don't. I understand your reasoning with Vargas. I guess I'm being more... I saw Vargas fight a couple of fights live, and I've seen him in just, ho-hum fights, and I've seen him get some gifts. In order for him to beat Timothy Bradley, he's going to have to be at his best. And I'll tell you, if you're right on this one, Dax, Jesse Vargas is going to jump into basically superstardom if he beats Timothy Bradley. Not that Timothy Bradley is a top superstar, but a win over Bradley would definitely catapult him. I'm going against you. I'm taking Bradley on that one. And the last one you're doing is who?
Yeah, I have to agree with you 100% on the Timothy Bradley situation, and we spoke about that before. Always a big fan of his. I just don't know why fans won't take to him for one reason or another. But he definitely has that skill set, and definitely one of the most unappreciated fighters in the sport over the last 6 or 7 years. Final fight is going to be Diego Magdaleno against Jose Gonzalez.
Okay, what's your thoughts?
Diego Magdaleno has some good wins over Emmanuel Lucero, Fernando Beltran. He lost to Roman Martinez at super featherweight by split decision. That loss was a little bit questionable. The pros on him, he has fast hands, a lot of movements. He almost reminds me of Diego Sanchez from the UFC with the way, he gets in there and so active, and you're so excited inside that ring. He has good combinations. He works the body with a straight right hand to the midsection. That might be his best punch. Other than that, he has an uppercut to the body that works very well for him. He has better than average speed. He knows how to maximize his jab. What I mean by maximizing his jab is a lot of guys, even when they pump their jab out, they pump it straight forward. They turn the shoulder like they're supposed to, but, Diego kind of like how the old fighters used to see, when they threw that jab, they kind of turned and they extended that shoulder all the way out. Remember how Jerry Cooney used to do that as a heavyweight? He would add another 3 to 4 inches on the end of his jab, and that, really gives them the space to work, and it gives them a couple extra seconds to set their feet before their opponent sets in. We don't see that much anymore, especially at guys his age. Being a southpaw is always an advantage when you have a fast jab. Being a southpaw throws a lot of guys off, no matter how experienced they are. Another thing I like about him is the way he bends down and squats to miss punches. Remember how a young Mike Tyson used to duck down with his legs and kind of squat and move his head around, and guys would just swing right over his head, and when he would pop back up, his hands would be letting go, and that's something that Diego does. The cons on him is sometimes he's a little bit too herky-jerky when he moves his shoulders side to side. It'd be great if he was a little more unorthodox in his style, but he has a rhythm that when he does it, it can be timed after a few rounds if a guy's paying attention. He also swings wide when he gets a little over-anxious. His hooks leave him wide open for counters, and sometimes they'll get him in trouble. In that Roman Martinez fight, that was the time that it got him in trouble. Of course, he got back up and he was fine, but, it was something where, as somebody who has a little bit more power than a Roman Martinez, that could be a big issue. And no power has came up with him from the super featherweight division to the lightweight division. Now, across from him, we have Jose Gonzalez. Not much to speak of in terms of skill or ability. He's really kind of an unknown. His best win is probably over Marvin Quintero, and I believe that was because of an ankle injury. He lost to Ricky Burns, and that was his only loss in 2013, but, that was due to a wrist injury on his behalf. Ricky Burns back then was a force in the sport. He was on a long run, and he was champion. So, at that point in time, that was not a loss that anybody made you question anything Jose Gonzalez was going to do or be in the future. He has some great hooks to the body, and especially the liver shot. He hurts guys with that and sets them up so they drop their hands down and the head is open. If you ever watched the Gerardo Cuevas fight, you see when he let that liver shot go, he stepped back and he knew that Cuevas was going to drop down in a couple seconds, and that's exactly what happened. And when Cuevas was managed to get back up, he had nothing left because he was hurt. It was almost like how Bernard Hopkins stopped Oscar De La Hoya. There was that little bit of a delayed reaction, and he's done it a few times to other opponents. Gonzalez has had a lot of showcase fights, who are some last-minute replacements, such as Oscar Cuero, and he was also stopped by one of those body shots. Jose's easy to hit. He has a come straight forward style. He will keep his hands high, but his gloves, they're already split, so it makes it easy for an opponent to go straight down the middle and land cleanly to the face. His worst habit, absolutely, with no question, is when so many guys with power make. He seems to be in love with it. He believes his power is going to get him through any situation. He's going to throw wide haymakers if he thinks his man is hurt and there's nothing coming back. He abandons cutting off the ring, which he's usually very good at when the fights begin. When nothing happens there, he'll rely strictly on a 1-2 combination, hoping to catch his opponents off guard, and he becomes very predictable. This is interesting to see, only because how's Diego going to deal with the power? If he shows he has a good chin, Bill, that means that Diego's future's wide. That means Diego has a bright future. That's why I chose this, because we're looking for new stars inside this sport. Diego Magdaleno, I know him, and I know his brother. You've been really high on. I like them both, too. This is kind of a do-or-die situation for him right now. He's on that cusp on becoming the name at that next level or just becoming an also-ran. If he does good this weekend, he's going to be a name on that next level inside of a year or two. And with all these guys going out of the sport like we spoke of the other day, that's very important, not only for marketability, not only for, a guy's future, but because of fights coming on to broadcast television more and more and more now. The worldwide recognition gets out there, and of course that's the bigger money and bigger paydays in these guys' pockets. And one thing that I have been thinking about for a while, I think we discussed it the other day, the more money that some of these young guys make, the less they're going to have to fight. Remember years ago, Bill, how guys had 30, 35 fights, and, by the time they were 30, 35 years old, they were considered old, and they kind of slowed down. These guys today, fighting, for no reason, for these pennies that, they think they're making, and they're spending that money just as fast, is kind of detrimental to them. That's why I'd like to see these young guys advance their careers quickly.
And so your official prediction is
It's Diego Magliano. I'm sorry, I thought I gave that.
Oh, okay. So you're taking Magladeno. I too am taking Magladeno, even though it's not part of our challenge. This fight, because of the injury, I for some reason I thought they might not do it. But I like the younger brother. We were talking earlier today. I like Jesse Magladeno. Now Diego Magladeno had his shot at a title and came up short, I believe, in China. So this is an important fight, and you're right. He's in with a tough guy, and like you mentioned earlier, a power puncher. But Maldonado is quick, and I too will be picking him. So ought to be an interesting fight. Real quick, I know, great job as usual. Real quick, the Oscar Valdez and Ruben Tamayo fight. Do you see that being any kind of a challenge for Valdez?
Ruben Tamayo, his best days are behind him, obviously. Valdez, I'm not really sure, I'm not sold on him yet, to be honest with you. I haven't so far, seen anything in him that makes me think, he's a potential superstar.
No,
how this fight goes, I'm not really sure. Then, Tamayo, as best as past days, I really don't think that, this is anything to get excited about in the first place.
What about in the fight tomorrow night in the super middleweight division with Gilberto Ramirez, who has been looking better and better, but he really hasn't beaten a premier fighter, and he's not going up against one tomorrow night either in Derek Edwards, although Edwards is a decent fighter. He's certainly not a upper echelon fighter. I mean, do you see Ramirez continuing his rise?
And, that was funny. Remember the other day we spoke about Bado Jack real quick on the air, and Derek Edwards was the guy that upset Bado Jack. But since then, Derek Edwards really hasn't done anything special. If I'm not mistaken, he didn't Andre Dirrell pretty much just dismantle him, and I know Matt Korobov, did as well. Bado Jack, what was this kid's highlight moment? Other than that, he's just pretty much been nothing but an opponent on a resume. And, as far as just doing anything for Gilberto Ramirez, it's not going to make him at all. If anything, taking a fight like this is actually going to drop his stock, in my opinion. People are expecting this kid right here, after 31 bouts, that he should be moving up. He shouldn't be moving down. I think Derek Edwards is a step back instead of a step forward.
After the Bado Jack fight, you mean?
No, I'm talking about, for Gilberto Ramirez, I think this is a step back for him facing Derek Edwards other than, a step forward. Yeah. Derek Edwards' highlight of his whole career was the Bado Jack fight. Catching Bado Jack, maybe he was a little overconfident. Other than that, he's been nothing but an opponent fighter. He lost, since then I think he managed to go the distance with Andre Dirrell. That might have been the other highlight of his career. He's a name on the opponent. You got a kid right here who's red hot if they bring him along correctly in Ramirez. And, sitting here, this kid's got 31 wins, 24 knockouts to 25 knockouts. Putting him in there against somebody like this is what makes this is what turns fans off of people.
You mean off of fighters? You're right, and
yeah, right.
You're right about Ramirez. Here's a guy that this is what bothers me about, and we're actually talking about the same type of thing in the chat room right now. When you decide to get in this business and you start to rise as a young fighter, then you become a prospect and a contender, and then of course a title challenger. You wait to get better and better. The only thing that I see with Edwards doing good against Jack, and like you said, he caught him that night. Ramirez is a big guy. The size difference is pretty pronounced, and it's going to be interesting to see if Edwards can be competitive. I don't think he is. I think Ramirez is the real deal. And I think, if we're forced to get this fight, this is it. He needs to be in a major fight with his next outing, Dax.
If this is, we, for example, we're always talking about Deontay Wilder on how he never really progressed on his way to becoming a champion, and he's fought a lot of guys that were walkover opponents. Even his last fight, was one that you wouldn't have expected for him, and he didn't look that good in there. Now, everybody thought he was going to fall flat on his face when he challenged Berman Stavern, and he excelled there. But how many other times have we seen when these guys step up after so many easy fights, the first time they get somebody in there they can't get rid of, they fall down, and that's what's going to happen to this kid if they don't do something soon. He should have been, right now, at 31 fights, already have challenged for a world title. He should already be one of the top names on the list. I don't see anybody in the top 10 right now having much of a problem with him outside of his power. So it's been nothing but detrimental, his career, and but as I stated before, this is a step backwards, not forwards, and these are the type of fights that hurt a guy, and what I always like to say, sets them up for failure in the future.
No, you're right, because they don't get better, but anyway, great job as usual, Dax. I appreciate that, and hopefully we can get some final thoughts from you on tomorrow's show.
All right, talk to everybody later on. Enjoy your evening.
All right, my man. Take care. That's Daxx Khan, and he just gave us his boxing, his 3 favorite fights of the week. And in case you miss it, if you're just tuning in, we put those up under Dax's column. Usually sometime tomorrow it'll be up, so you can go back and see those breakdowns and see how good he did with his picks. Hey, I'm over my break time, so you know what I got to do, right?
Talking boxing.